ever get that sinking feeling, like you scored this amazing deal, but then it hits you, you didn't really know what you were buying. Yeah, we've all been there. And today, we're taking a deep dive into a concept from Islamic finance that might just save us from those buyer's remorse moments. We're talking about Gharar, basically, the idea that hidden risks and missing information can really throw a wrench in a deal, making it, well, not so fair. To help us unpack this whole thing, we're tagging along with Aisha. She's a student who's just starting to explore Islamic finance. And get this, our source material, it's actually this really engaging story about Aisha's experience with Gharar. So picture this. Aisha's walking home one day and she spots this incredible Victorian house for sale. And the price, way too good to be true. But as she starts looking into it, like doing her due diligence and all that, she finds all these hidden problems, missing information stuff that would make anyone think twice. And that, my friends, is where Gharar comes in.
Yeah, you got it. So Gharar in Arabic, it basically means uncertainty or excessive risk in, like a business deal or a transaction. Think of it like this. You're buying a used car,
Right.
right? But you don't bother with the mechanic's inspection. Or maybe you're signing a lease, but there are like whole pages missing. That's Gharar. Things are super unclear, and someone could totally take advantage because, well, crucial information is just gone.
So it's not just about making a risky choice. It's deeper than that. It's about those situations where, hidden problems or unfair advantages can totally skew the whole deal.
100%. And this whole concept, it's deeply rooted in Islamic tradition. Like the Prophet Muhammad himself, he straight up prohibited any transaction that involved Gharar. He emphasized how vital transparency and fairness are in everything we do, especially when it comes to money.
Makes total sense, right? It's like setting a standard for how we deal with each other in the financial world, whether it's real estate, investments, even just buying groceries, being upfront and honest is key.
And here's the thing. This principle, even though it's, centuries old, it's crazy relevant today, especially with how complex things are in finance. I mean, think about the whole subprime mortgage crisis back when all those loans bundled with hidden fees and crazy risks, and boom, it affected millions of people. That's Gharar on a massive scale.
So Aisha's real estate adventure, it's not just some isolated incident. It highlights how Gharar can pop up anywhere, and we need to be aware of it. Speaking of Aisha, let's get back to her story. So she starts digging into the history of this too-good-to-be-true house, right? And guess what she finds? A whole bunch of shady business practices, contractual disputes, all this stuff pointing back to, you guessed it, Gharar. It's like one of those Law and Order episodes, right? The plot just keeps thickening. Every time I find something out, bam, more Gharar.
Totally. And you know what's scary? This isn't just some made-up story, right?
Yeah.
It shows how easily this stuff can happen to anyone. Like, we could be Aisha.
Exactly. And it really drives home how serious the consequences of ignoring Gharar can be.
No kidding. It's not even just about, losing money, although that obviously sucks, but it cuts deeper. It's about trust, fairness, the whole ethical foundation of how we do business. That gets shaken.
Okay, so we get it. Buying a house. Prime Gharar territory. But what about, other situations? How does Gharar sneak into our lives in, everyday stuff?
Oh, man, all over the place. Think about insurance, right? You'd think, okay, I'm covered, I'm safe, but guess what? Gharar loves hanging out in an insurance contract.
Oh, tell me about it. I swear, half the time I need a law degree just to read those things.
Right. All that jargon, those hidden clauses, classic Gharar. Because that lack of clarity, it opens the door for all sorts of problems, disputes, unfair outcomes. That's why it's so important to actually understand what you're signing. Ask questions, get clarification, especially when it's something as important as insurance.
Don't just click I agree without reading, folks.
For real.
Yeah.
And this whole details matter thing, it goes way beyond just individual stuff. Think about the stock market, for instance. Yeah, investing always has risks, but those risks get amplified when information is hidden or messed with.
Oh, yeah. Insider trading, companies cooking the books. We've all heard the horror stories of people losing everything because some folks weren't playing fair.
And that's where Gharar comes in again. It demands transparency. Companies need to be upfront about their finances. Investors need accurate information to make good decisions. It's about creating a level playing field.
So whether we're talking houses, insurance, stocks, the message is clear. Don't just jump in blindly. Do your homework. Gharar is out there, people.
100%. But it's bigger than just avoiding the negative, right? It's about actively trying to build a financial system that's actually ethical.
Now that's a goal I can get behind.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious, has this idea of Gharar, always been a big deal in Islamic societies? Or is this a newer thing?
Oh, it's deeply rooted, man. I mean, we're talking like foundational to Islamic tradition. It goes right back to the Prophet Muhammad's teachings, the Quran. It's about this core value of ethical conduct, justice, fairness that applies to everything, especially financial dealings.
So it stood the test of time. That's pretty impressive.
It really has. And you know what's cool? Islamic scholars throughout history, they've really wrestled with Gharar, like debated it, figured out how it applies to different situations. And those discussions have actually shaped legal systems, business practices. It's had a real impact.
Wow, that's fascinating. Who knew a concept with roots in religious and ethical values could actually have such a tangible impact on, like, entire economic system?
Right. And the best part is, looking at this historical context can help us figure out how to apply Gharar today.
Uh-huh.
Because the world's changing, finance is changing, but the core principles, they matter. It's about making sure that whatever we do, it's rooted in fairness and transparency.
It's amazing, right? Something from so long ago and it still speaks to us today just shows how important those ethical foundations really are.
Yeah, for real. And it's not enough to just like know about them. We got to actually live them out, especially when it comes to money.
100%. So how can our listeners take this idea of Gharar and actually use it in their lives? Because let's be real, the financial world can feel pretty overwhelming sometimes.
Totally get it. But the cool thing about Gharar is that it gives you power. You can make smarter choices, more ethical choices every single day. It starts with, not just believing everything you hear. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to push back a little if something doesn't feel right, especially if you don't fully understand it.
So, don't just blindly trust. Got to do your own digging.
Exactly. Whether it's a phone contract, an investment, even those terms of service online, people just click through, read the fine print. And if something seems off, if you're like, wait, what does that even mean? Ask. Or just walk away. Seriously.
Trust your gut, right?
Yeah.
If a deal sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Bingo. And never underestimate the power of knowledge. Learn about your rights as a consumer. Do some research on the companies you're dealing with. There are even financial advisors out there who specialize in ethical, transparent stuff. Find those people.
Be proactive. Don't just let money happen to you. Take control.
Yes. And this goes beyond just our own personal choices, too. We got to push for more transparency and fairness in the whole system. Support businesses that are doing things right. Talk about financial literacy. Hold the big guys accountable.
So it's about individual action, but also collective action. We can actually change the system itself.
100%. And that brings us right back to the core of Gharar, right? It's about taking responsibility for ourselves, yeah, but for each other, too. Integrity, fairness.
Right.
Those things matter.
Aisha's little real estate adventure turned into quite the deep dive. We went from a spooky old house to the foundations of Islamic finance and how those ideas are still so relevant in our world today.
Seriously. Who knew? But that's the thing about these deep dives. Always something new to discover.
That's right. And speaking of discoveries, we've reached the end of today's deep dive, but the conversation doesn't have to stop here. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you encountered Gharar in your own financial life? How have you navigated those tricky situations? Head over to our social media pages and share your experiences. And as always, thanks for joining us for the deep dive.